Well, class of 2016, distinguished guests, President Kerwin, Dean Goldgeier, my good friend Jeff Sine, Allison, your speech was just terrific. Let's thank her again. This is a special honor for me to be here, and you'll see why as I speak. We're so connected in two main areas that have dominated the second half of my life: peace and service. Service and peace. At a time when we have conflicts in 30 places in the world, in the United States, we're at an all-time homicide record level. We have 2.2 million people in prison, the wealthiest nation in the world. And we have presidential candidates who are hurling vile comments and criticisms at one another. If ever there was a time that we needed peace, it's right now. And I'm so in awe of you because you've made this choice coming out of college. It took me 45 years to get to where you are today. And we know that you can't be happy through wealth, celebrity, power, fame, or holding the highest elected office in our country. Happiness only comes from peace, inner peace, peace of mind, the most direct route to happiness through peace. The most direct route to happiness through peace is in service to others. A great philosopher, one of the Dalai Lama's monks, Matthieu Ricard, said in his book on happiness, the direct route to happiness is in service to others. So I'll tell you my story, but only to connect to you and with the recognition my generation has not succeeded. We really need you. We turn to you. You're going to make that difference. And when Allison spoke of terrorism and things that we're facing in the world today that we didn't face 20 and 30 years ago, the importance, the responsibility that falls on your shoulder is greater than any other generation before this. So, as Scott said, I was born in Newark, family of modest means, and the city had begun to turn violent. I went to Rutgers, Newark on a state scholarship and studied business and accounting. I should have studied service and peace and international relations. Went to Wall Street and ran into a great deal of good fortune. And in 1981, I joined forces with Bill Simon, the former Secretary of the Treasury. And we hit the right time with private equity, and within several years, we were so wealthy we could have never anticipated it. And Bill came into my office and said, "Isn't this great? We're at the top of Wall Street. We've earned more than we ever thought we could. You don't look happy." I said, "I'm not happy. I don't know what it is. I assumed if you have a family, I'm here with my wonderful wife, Patty, you have financial independence, you enjoy what you're doing, you have friends, you'll be automatically happy." And I'm not. So Bill said, "What would it take for you to be happy?" And without thinking, I said, "If we could lose it and do it again." I should have never said that to Bill Simon because he said, "You know, you need a vacation." But from that point forward, I knew something was missing in my life, and I would never find satisfaction, fulfillment, and happiness by earning more money or celebrity or power. And I had awakened one morning, and we were both on the Forbes 400 list. And that was taking me in a different direction than I wanted to go. So I wandered into the Boys and Girls Clubs of Newark, and I started to get to know the children. And they were so riveting for me. I kept going back each and every day, learning about their plights in life. And that gap, that void, started to fill in. And I was watching these children, mostly of teenage mothers, stop learning by the 5th grade. And I said, we can't let this go on. So out of sheer desperation, again, you'll see, I had no training in any of this. I announced that I would adopt 1,000 minority Newark youngsters and pay their tuition through college. And these were 5, 6, 7-year-olds. Thank you. And I found myself gravitating to them and away from the next big billion-dollar deal. And as I worked with them, as I got to know them, we set up a caring adult or a mentor, big brother, big sister, in each of their lives. And that made more of a difference than the money we put in trust for their college education. And the first group of youngsters, 7 years old, met with the Board of Trustees on a Saturday. They recited their ready pledge. They answered all kinds of questions. And the teacher said, would any of you like to ask a question of the board members? And this one young, handsome 7-year-old boy, Atif, stood up and said, I'd like to compliment the board on how nice they look today. And I said, time out. This young man is either going to be President of the United States or a challenge to society. So I got to know Atif, and I've learned more from him in the last 29 years than I've learned from anybody in the business world. And a couple months later, we had a golf dinner at our house for the Boys and Girls Club. We invited Atif, and he met this golfer, Fuzzy Zeller. And Fuzzy introduced himself to Atif. Atif said, my name is Atif. Fuzzy asked him, how old are you? And Atif said, as a matter of fact, I'm going to be 8 years old tomorrow. And so Fuzzy gave him $5 and said, happy birthday. Within 5 seconds, Atif knew he had the beginning of an entrepreneurial business. So he went up to one of our guests, Frank Walsh, and said, Mr. Walsh, tomorrow's my birthday, and Fuzzy gave me $5. By the time I stopped him, he had collected $82 from our guests. One of the sharpest entrepreneurs I've ever met. A couple of years later, I was taking him and his sister to get sneakers. And they each had different fathers. And unfortunately, Atif's dad died in prison. So he asked if he could call me daddy, and I said he could. And so he was calling me daddy, and his sister said, why are you calling Mr. C daddy? And Atif said, well, my daddy died. And I asked Mr. C if I could call him daddy. Isn't that right, daddy? And I said, yes. He appropriately stuck his tongue out at his sister and let a half a minute go by. And he said, now that we got that straight, daddy, are you old enough to have a will? And I thought, that's good. He was unbelievable. So what we learned from those youngsters in Newark, when President Bush, 41, asked me to be the founding chairman of his 1,000 Points of Light Foundation, I really picked up on the potential of service. And today, the Points of Light Foundation is the biggest volunteer service organization in the world. And part of that, so what we learned in Newark was that caring adult, that mentor, made more of a difference than the money and trust. So I asked President Bush if we could create a national mentoring partnership, which he agreed to. And at that time, with all of Big Brothers and Big Sisters and the other mentoring organizations, we had 350,000 mentors in the country. If we could get to 1 million, the World Bank had calculated we would save US taxpayers $1 trillion. So we worked hard over the last 25 years. Colin Powell joined us in 1997. We formed America's Promise, and we went from 350,000 mentors in 1991 to 4 million today in the United States. Now, this thought, this mantra, you can do that. You can do that. We need you to do that. And we have to expand that. And we found out from Colin Powell after September 11th, after we were all so devastated, what could we do to prevent terrorism? And I had had no international experience at all, other than in business. And Colin said before the World Economic Forum, we must level the playing field. How are we going to level the playing field? So the staff of our foundation came upon the Millennium Development Goals that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. 8 goals, 192 nations signed on to them. And daunting, far-reaching, but measurable, and if achieved, could level that playing field. So we began the work to optimize the likelihood that we could achieve the Millennium Development Goals. And in the middle of it, somebody showed me a photo of 3 little children under the age of 5 in Malawi that were sleeping. And I said, aren't they cute? He said, you don't realize this. They're all in malaria comas, and they probably died after that. I'll never get that picture out of my mind's eye. So I said, let's take on malaria. Knew nothing about it, something you could do. You're probably better trained for it than I was. And I found out that these insecticide-treated mosquito nets really worked, because the Anopheles mosquito only bit after 10 o'clock at night. You could get 3 children under a net. They should be asleep by 10 o'clock. And the net cost less than $10. So in my simplistic mind, I said, let's just cover everybody in Africa with the nets. A month later, I found out we would have to cover 1 billion people. So I said, let's take it on. We formed Malaria No More. We went to American Idol in 2007. We got Simon Cowell and Ryan Seacrest to go to Africa, sleep under the nets, and the first Idol Give Back show produced $80 million, but more importantly, exposed malaria to 50 million people. And we picked up the saying, $10 buys a bed net, saves a child's life. And I was traveling throughout Africa, through 43 countries that had malaria, and watching these 3-year-olds with their teenage moms, knowing that if they didn't get that right medication within 30 hours, their lives were over. So we recruited the National Basketball Association, Major League Soccer, and we did everything possible. 3rd graders were having bake sales to raise $40 so they could buy 4 nets for children in Africa. Over 10 years, we raised $10 billion, great team. We covered 1 billion people with bed nets. We reduced mortality by 71%, and we saved the lives of 7 million children. You can do that. We need you to do that. I didn't know anything about malaria, and look what's happened in a 10-year period. Nothing has produced such satisfaction and happiness for me as being part of the team that allowed that to happen. And then 2 years ago, I learned about September 21st being International Day of Peace and also the U.S. Day of Peace. And I had never heard of it. So within my authority at the United Nations, I said, let's raise visibility. And I can't tell you how I made friends like this, but with friends like Tyra Banks and Justin Bieber, we reached 1.7 billion people with the message last year, #ForgiveForPeace. And we raised so much interest that this coming September 21st, we're trying to get as many cities, states, nations in the world to agree to 24 hours of peace. Lay down your arms, nonviolence. And I'm so honored to be here, to connect with you, to see these two main roads we have in common, service and peace, that I'm going to suggest, recommend, and challenge you with the following. We would like to engage together with graduates, undergraduates, faculty, and shoot to have as our target 24 hours of nonviolence in Washington, D.C. on September 21st. Everybody will have a chance to participate. And timing is going to be fairly tight. I think Amy from Dean Goldgeier's office said everybody has to have their best idea, best strategy of how to bring about 24 hours of peace in Washington, D.C. on September 21st. Jeff Sine has agreed to get Vice Media, one of the top producers of videos, documentaries, to do an entire video and a documentary of the work being done by AU and its undergraduates and its alums. And it will be presented on a major network showing all the challenges, difficulty, and the results. One last thing, small thing. The winners will receive $100,000. So to sum things up, the most direct route to peace and happiness is through service to others, through aspiring to get to inner peace and peace of mind. It's not through celebrity, wealth, power, holding the highest office in this country. And I think back to when Nelson Mandela was accused of being an optimist. Can you imagine somebody being accused of being an optimist? And he handled it so well. He said, okay, don't look at me as an optimist. Look at me as a prisoner of hope. And I've adopted that over the last 10 years myself. So I wish all of you inner peace, peace of mind, the greatest career possible in service to others. And I hope you get sentenced to a lifetime of being in the prison of hope. Thank you very much.